A pendant sealed in secrecy for nearly a century now, the center of a royal storm. When Princess Beatrice steps forward with a revelation no one saw coming, whispers turn to gasps, and Buckingham Palace finds itself caught in a whirlwind of legacy, jealousy, and ancient promises. Could this be the moment that redefines royal inheritance? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It was meant to be just another quiet gathering behind the thick walls of Windsor, one of those reserved family assemblies that rarely ripple beyond the royal gates. Yet this one would spark a storm. As eyes turned to Princess Beatrice, no one could have anticipated the weight of what she carried in her hands, a small, ornate box wrapped in deep violet velvet and sealed with an unfamiliar insignia. She didn't say much at first, only that it was time, and then, gently, she opened it. Inside lay a pendant, unlike any that had appeared in royal inventories or museum archives. Its design was delicate, but powerful, an emerald centerpiece, surrounded by a halo of white diamonds, and behind it, a gold etching of a single word: continuum. All conversation stopped. The air stiffened. And then came the words that truly unraveled the room: it belonged to Queen Mary. And she wished for it to pass, not to me, but to my daughter, Sienna. There was no applause, no ceremonial handover, just stunned silence, broken only by the slight shift of seats and a sharp intake of breath from Camilla, Queen Consort. Her face, previously composed in royal indifference, visibly cracked. The eyes narrowed, the lips pressed together. And yet, she said nothing. She simply watched, as Beatrice reached for a folded letter tucked beneath the velvet. The seal had already been broken, the contents known only to her until now. In that letter, as Beatrice carefully explained, were the late Queen Mary's personal instructions that had not been found among official estate records or ceremonial documents, but passed down discreetly through generations, perhaps kept out of reach on purpose. The pendant, according to Beatrice, was part of Queen Mary's hidden trove, a collection never publicly catalogued. Unlike the crown jewels or traditional heirlooms openly worn at coronations, this was intimate, private, a symbol not of reign but of trust. And that trust, Queen Mary had made clear, was to be extended to a descendant marked by resilience, grace, and separation from expectation. The room, already tight with emotion, grew tenser still. Some interpreted it as an act of love. Others saw something else: defiance, a breach of protocol, perhaps even a challenge. What ignited real unease, however, was Beatrice's quiet declaration that the pendant was never hers to keep. "It was meant for her," she whispered, glancing toward a photograph of Sienna on a nearby table, "and I've waited long enough to make sure it finds its rightful place." Several senior royals shifted uncomfortably. Some avoided eye contact. It wasn't just what Beatrice had done, it was how she had done it. Without clearance, without committee, without bowing to the structure that defines them all. Camilla's silence was louder than any outburst, but the chill in her expression, calculated, watchful, was enough to signal the beginning of a quiet war. In a world where inheritance is legacy, and legacy is power, Beatrice had just rewritten a chapter that many assumed was closed, and she had done so with calm, unapologetic finality. But where did this pendant come from, and why was it hidden from royal records for so long? She was known for her stoic grace, but behind Queen Mary's diamonds lay secrets she carried to the grave. What did she leave behind that was never meant to be unearthed until now? The story of Queen Mary has long been wrapped in formality and silence. To the public, she was the epitome of regal endurance, dutiful, precise, and unshakably composed. But behind the icy pearls and dazzling tiaras, there existed a private world only a handful were ever allowed to glimpse. A world of intent, of personal choices that defied the strict protocols she outwardly upheld. And within that world was a collection not found in official catalogues or state displays, a personal cache of heirlooms safeguarded with fierce discretion. Among these was a single pendant, emerald inlaid and unlike anything ever worn in public, engraved with a word that now echoes like prophecy: continuum. A name, a symbol, a whisper through time. Queen Mary's obsession with inheritance went beyond ceremony. It bordered on the mystical. She believed that bloodline alone was not enough. Continuity, in her eyes, had to be earned through character. She was known to handpick recipients for her personal keepsakes based on who demonstrated quiet strength over public performance. Her daughter, Princess Mary, once noted in a letter that her mother spoke more through gifts than words. That legacy took form in small, symbolic treasures, tokens that, though never spoken of aloud, carried the weight of silent decree. One such treasure was the pendant. It was rumoured to have been crafted in secrecy, its origins concealed from the royal collection archives and kept separate from the crown jewels. Not even Queen Elizabeth wore it, nor did it appear in coronation inventories or formal will records. For decades, royal watchers and historians whispered of a final gift Queen Mary had allegedly set aside, a treasure never given, never claimed. Theories surrounded it. Some believed it was meant for Princess Margaret. Others speculated it vanished after Queen Mary's passing, intentionally buried beneath layers of protocol. But the truth, it seems, had not disappeared. It had been waiting in silence, in velvet, in secrecy until now. For this was no ordinary pendant. The engraving, continuum, was not merely decorative. It was the code of Queen Mary's belief that strength must endure quietly, passed not through ceremony, but spirit. And with it came a burden, a promise whispered between generations, never shouted across headlines. There are whispers that the pendant was once offered to Queen Mary's daughter in a moment of private sorrow, when the monarchy faced its most uncertain hour. And that Princess Mary, honouring her mother's legacy, chose not to wear it, but to guard it. Over the years, that chain of guardianship passed silently, unrecorded in public estate accounts, yet fiercely honoured behind palace walls. After Queen Mary's death, the pendant was placed in a vaulted chest, behind layers of personal effects. The chest itself was omitted from estate inventories. When asked, staff were instructed to refer to it as unfiled family materials. Now, the pendant has emerged not in the hands of traditions chosen, but through Beatrice, a royal who has often walked the line between visibility and restraint. She has shattered the illusion that all was known, all was settled. She has revived a legacy that was never truly gone, just sleeping. And in naming Sienna the pendant's heir, she may have ignited Queen Mary's final intention. If Queen Mary left this pendant for someone, how did it end up in Beatrice's hands, and why now? Locked for decades. A vault key passed from grandmother to granddaughter. When Beatrice opened the hidden compartment in her private residence, she uncovered more than a pendant. She ignited a royal reckoning. It began with a box that no one expected to matter. Passed quietly from the Queen Mother's estate to Beatrice, it arrived with no fanfare, no warning, just a handwritten note on aged cream parchment and an old brass key bound with a delicate red ribbon. It had sat untouched for months. Life, royal obligations, and the ever-present pressure to maintain appearances kept it closed. Until one late evening, curiosity overtook restraint. The lock turned with resistance, as though it knew it was guarding more than objects. Inside lay folded linen, a scent of lavender and thyme, and nestled deep within a smaller, cedar-lined compartment. That's where she found it, the pendant, and the note. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the letter. The handwriting was unmistakable, Queen Mary's, looping, elegant but heavy with finality. It read like a prophecy, to be handed down to the daughter of the bloodline with resilience. The phrase struck her like a thunderclap. Not to the eldest, not to the reigning monarch, not even to the direct heir, but to the resilient. Beatrice stared at those words for what felt like hours, the silence around her breaking only by the sound of her own heartbeat. Shh. He had no doubt who the note referred to, and it wasn't her. What she held was more than jewelry, it was intention, generational intention, a thread of legacy meant not to empower the powerful, but to anoint the quiet strength passed down in the shadows. Sienna, her daughter, young, protected, but already showing signs of a resolve that echoed something far older than her years. Beatrice could have kept the pendant, hidden it, preserved it, worn it quietly as others might have done to protect themselves from palace politics. But that would have betrayed the note, and everything Queen Mary stood for. She knew she had a choice, to let history bury this again or to set it free, even if it meant risking everything. So she made her decision. She would not hide it. She would not bury the pendant in the silence of royal tradition. Instead, she would reveal it not just to her daughter in a quiet bedtime ritual, but to the family, the world, and the legacy that demanded its return. She chose to do what generations had not, to let the truth surface regardless of consequence. The moment she did, everything began to change. A simple act of inheritance became a lightning rod. Conversations behind closed doors grew sharp. Phone calls turned cold, and whispers once harmless carried edge. Beatrice had lifted the curtain on a forgotten royal past, and not everyone appreciated the light that followed. What began as a personal moment between mother and daughter would soon erupt into royal chaos. She was never one to hold back behind closed doors, but Camilla's reaction to Beatrice's decision was anything but ceremonial. What was said in that tense corridor left Beatrice rattled and a guard stunned. The message came swiftly and without formality. Beatrice was to appear at Clarence's house. No explanation, no agenda, but the weight of what she had done, revealing the pendant, invoking Queen Mary's private legacy, and naming Sienna its heir, had already sent shockwaves through the palace. She entered the room with calm resolve, but it didn't take long for that composure to be tested. Camilla was waiting, and her expression was unmistakably icy. The Queen Consort, known for mastering the art of measured smiles and subtle corrections, dropped all pretense. Her tone was sharp, her gaze unforgiving. The conversation began with a question, but it was no invitation, it was a warning dressed as inquiry. "What gave you the right, Beatrice?" she said. "To make such a declaration with no consultation and at such a fragile time?" What followed was less a conversation than a calculated confrontation. Camilla accused her of spectacle, of using her daughter to win public affection, of exploiting sentiment for position. There were no guards of diplomacy here, just two women, bound by the crown but divided by the past, standing at a precipice neither had expected. Beatrice, for all her usual restraint, did not remain quiet. Her voice, though not raised, was unshakably clear. "This isn't about power," she said. "This is about honoring a promise, a legacy meant to bypass hierarchy and reach someone worthy." She named Queen Mary. She referenced the note. She even, for a moment, let her voice crack. "You can question my choices," she added, "but you can't erase the truth." What neither of them realized was that a royal aide, standing just around the corner, caught the moment the conversation escalated into something far more personal. Camilla's voice lowered, but the words were unmistakable. "That pendant was never meant for you or your child," she snapped. The silence afterward was a thunderclap. That one sentence, so piercing in its delivery, carried centuries of entitlement and centuries of exclusion. And yet, Beatrice didn't flinch. She stood, nodded once, and walked toward the door, without responding. Camilla followed a moment later, visibly rattled, muttering to an assistant about misinformation and media stunts. By the next morning, the tension had seeped through every corridor of the palace. Clarence's house issued no formal comment, but insiders spoke of an unplanned exchange and disagreement over historical interpretations. Still, Camilla denied any involvement in the media frenzy already taking shape. But the damage was done. Something had shifted, and not just within the institution. For the first time, people began to ask aloud what many had only whispered. If the old codes no longer held sway, then who truly defined royal worth? But Camilla wasn't the only one caught off guard. What Catherine did next would leave everyone speechless. She had remained silent as the palace scrambled. But when Catherine, Princess of Wales, broke her silence with a carefully worded message, the entire narrative shifted and alliances began to form. In a monarchy where silence often screams louder than speech, Catherine's public restraint had spoken volumes. As headlines dissected Beatrice's unprecedented decision and Camilla's discomfort simmered just beneath the surface, the Princess of Wales had stayed impeccably neutral, or so it seemed. But then, without warning or fanfare, the Kensington Palace Communications Office released a brief statement, buried within an unrelated charity announcement. The line was simple, almost too subtle to stir notice. In honor of intergenerational strength and the quiet power of legacy, we continue to uplift the voices that endure beyond ceremony. No names, no pendant, no mention of Beatrice or Sienna. Yet, it was clear. This was Catherine's answer, and it echoed like thunder through the palace halls. Within hours, speculation erupted. Analysts called it a veiled endorsement. Insiders whispered of carefully chosen woe. RDS approved solely by Catherine herself. Royal commentators began replaying old interviews and charity speeches, combing through her past like a trail of breadcrumbs. And then, one quote resurfaced nearly forgotten, from a quiet engagement years ago. During a speech honouring female lineage in the British countryside, Catherine had once referenced the private intentions of Queen Mary and spoke of the importance of unseen inheritances, those not always passed through crowns, but through character. At the time, it was poetic. In hindsight, it was prophetic. The public embraced it instantly. Social media erupted with comparisons, admiration, and a swelling tide of support for the image of three generations: Queen Mary, Beatrice, and now Sienna, bound not by rank, but resilience. And quietly, without confrontation or demand, Catherine had shifted the balance of sentiment. While Camilla's court seethed in silence, viewing the statement as a deliberate provocation masked in politeness, Catherine stood untouched. She had played no game, spoken no aggression, but her words cut through the narrative like a blade of calm defiance. Inside palace walls, the effects were immediate. Whispers of a silent bloc began to stir. Younger royals, those less tethered to the rigidity of protocol, yet still bound by duty, began exchanging glances and guarded affirmations behind the scenes. Some saw Beatrice's decision as courageous. Others feared it was reckless. But Catherine's intervention gave it legitimacy, not by declaring sides, but by elevating the principle behind it. Honor, legacy, strength beyond titles. The Queen Consort's inner circle grew uneasy, not because of what was said, but because of who had chosen to speak. Catherine had, once again, done what few could acknowledge: tradition while subtly guiding its evolution. A move that was graceful, yes, but unmistakably strategic. And, as the tides of royal perception began to shift, it was no longer just about a pendant. It was about the future of power, influence, and which vision of the monarchy would endure. If the younger royals were beginning to band together, what did that mean for the traditional line and the Queen Consort's influence? Lines have been drawn. Behind palace walls, once private loyalties begin to fracture. What was once a matter of jewelry now threatens to upend the unity of the royal household. The silence that followed Catherine's carefully placed statement was anything but peaceful. It was the kind of silence that grips a room before an earthquake, and when the tremor came, it didn't roar, it splintered. Zara Tindall, long considered a neutral force within the royal dynamic, was the first to be noticed shifting her weight, not through words, but actions. She appeared alongside Beatrice at a low-profile equestrian event, standing shoulder to shoulder without handlers or rehearsed pleasantries. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable, a silent alignment, and one that didn't go unnoticed by those watching closely. Then came Princess Eugenie, who needed no words at all. When she arrived at Sienna's birthday celebration, smiling and steady, the world caught a glimpse of the pendant around the child's neck. It was subtle, intentional, and it was war. Inside the palace, the atmosphere thickened. Prince Edward, who had remained largely disengaged from symbolic theatrics, reportedly voiced concerns behind closed doors, not necessarily about the pendant itself, but about what it had come to represent. He warned of inflammatory symbolism and questioned whether tradition was being quietly undermined by emotion. His words weren't aggressive, but they were weighted, and those who overheard them knew the conversation was shifting from family to institution. Then came Anne, the Princess Royal. Elle, known for her blunt pragmatism and loyalty to order, stepped in not to condemn or defend, but to control the bleeding. She called for a closed-door meeting, far from cameras and courtiers, to address what she termed the growing fragmentation. She demanded that family matters be handled as a family, not played out through veiled statements and public appearances. Yet even her call for unity couldn't stitch the widening tear. The king's silence, however, was more telling than any speech could have been. As the father of Beatrice, the uncle of Catherine, and the husband of Camilla, Charles III had every reason to intervene. But he didn't. No message, no direction, just a deepening absence that left everyone guessing. That vacuum of leadership became fertile ground for factions. Royal aides began to mirror their principles. Whisper networks formed between staff wings, security teams, private secretaries. Some leaned toward the preservation of old customs, while others quietly admired the bravery behind Beatrice's defiance. There were murmurs of loyalties being tested, realignments being discussed over quiet dinners, even notes passed between staff hinting at growing unrest. What had begun as a deeply personal choice between a mother and daughter had evolved into a full-scale institutional reckoning. And all the while, the pendant once locked away in silence hung from a child's neck, glowing beneath the spotlight of a fractured family. It was no longer just a piece of jewelry. It was a line in the sand, and people were beginning to choose sides. The monarchy had not faced a storm like this in years. But then, just when tensions seemed unbearable, a shocking document surfaces and everything changes again. A forgotten clause, a royal witness, a dusty box beneath the royal archives. When an archivist stumbles across a sealed envelope marked Codicil Private Eyes Only, it ignites the storm with greater fury. It began, like many royal upheavals do, with an accident disguised as fate. Deep within the royal archives, a junior archivist cataloguing personal effects from Queen Mary's posthumous estate uncovered a box long overlooked misfiled beneath naval records and ceremonial scripts. Inside was a sealed envelope, cracked with time but intact. The wax bore Queen Mary's unmistakable personal crest, not the royal coat of arms, but her private monogram used only on sensitive correspondences. Stamped across the front were 4 haunting words, Codicil Private Eyes Only. The contents, when opened under supervision, ignited chaos. It was, without question, an amendment to Queen Mary's will, one never disclosed, never executed, and perhaps some hoped never meant to be found. But the document was authentic. Handwritten, dated and countersigned by a now-deceased royal confidant, it bore legal structure and explicit instruction. The language was careful but devastating in its implication. The pendant, identified in veiled phrasing as the emerald continuum, was to pass not to the eldest heir or to the sovereign's branch, but to a descendant of Mary's bloodline, born to the youngest granddaughter, raised outside the central flame of expectation. For those who could read between the lines, the message was unequivocal. The codicil pointed directly to Beatrice. And through her to Sienna, the revelation detonated across the royal landscape. Legal experts scrambled to determine whether the document held constitutional weight. Was it simply a personal wish or a binding amendment to a royal will? Some argued that the secrecy of its placement invalidated it. Others insisted that its authenticity, paired with a witness and signature, made it irrefutable. Camilla's legal advisors were swift and severe. Within hours, they submitted a formal request to Privy Council to dismiss the codicil's relevance, branding it non-constitutional, emotionally driven, and incompatible with modern inheritance protocols. Their argument was clear. Queen Mary, while revered, could not alter the trajectory of symbolic power from the grave. But outside those halls, the debate had already spilled into the public sphere. BBC and ITV aired live panels where historians, biographers, and constitutional scholars clashed in front of millions. Some called it the missing puzzle piece in Queen Mary's famously cryptic legacy. Others warned it set a dangerous precedent where emotion could hijack structure. But it wasn't just legal minds weighing in, the people had begun to choose. Polls showed overwhelming support for honouring Queen Mary's original words. Beatrice's choice, once viewed as impulsive, now looked ordained. Sienna's role, once dismissed as symbolic, now felt divinely threaded through royal lineage. And within the palace, the silence grew heavier. Those who had once doubted Beatrice were now re-evaluating every word she'd spoken, every decision she'd made. She hadn't broken protocol, she had followed a hidden one. Not invented by her, but inherited. The codicil had reframed everything. A private gift had transformed into a dynastic reckoning. and just as the monarchy struggled to recalibrate, whispers began to rise once more of a child stepping into a light she never asked for. The revelations were damning, but what happened next would redefine royal inheritance forever. One child, one pendant, and a moment that left even the most stoic royal watchers in stunned silence. Sienna made her first public appearance, and the pendant was glowing against her heart. It wasn't a coronation, a christening, or a balcony wave. It was something quieter, but no less seismic, a remembrance event at a centuries-old chapel, meant to honor the lives and legacies of royal women who had shaped the crown from behind the veil of history. Beatrice arrived with her daughter beside her, hand in hand, modestly dressed, and without fanfare. But what caught every lens, every whisper, and every pulse of attention was what rested just below Sienna's collarbone. The pendant. Queen Mary's emblem of resilience, shining in the open, no longer hidden in velvet or shrouded in family whispers. In that instant, a child became the carrier of a forgotten queen's final wish, and the world reacted accordingly. The media didn't miss it. Within minutes, photos began circulating, first through royal photographers, then through every global outlet. A single moment turned into a movement. Headlines spoke not of scandal, but of symbolism. Queen Mary's flame reborn, read one. Sienna steps into legacy, declared another. The public, who had grown weary of royal rigidity and backroom politics, suddenly had a face to believe in, innocent, unentitled, and tethered to history by something far deeper than title. For a monarchy long criticized for resisting change, this moment felt like an unscripted shift towards something more human, more true. Notably, Camilla was absent from the event. No explanation was offered, and none was needed. Her absence, heavy in its silence, only fueled speculation that the internal divide was still raw, still widening. But others were very much present. William and Catherine stood only a few steps behind Beatrice, their expressions soft, welcoming. At one point, cameras caught Catherine leaning down to greet Sienna, with a smile that required no translation. William, ever reserved, offered a slight nod toward Beatrice, a gesture small in movement, but massive in message. There were no speeches, no declarations, but the symbolism cut through everything else. The future was no longer just a line of succession. It was a feeling, an instinct, a shared breath between generations. As the event concluded, something remarkable happened. Crowds outside began to cheer, not with the thunderous foe, CE of pageantry, but with something gentler, hope. The image of Sienna clutching her mother's hand with the pendant catching the late afternoon light became the most shared royal photograph of the year within hours. The monarchy, whether ready or not, had just witnessed the rise of a new kind of heir, one not chosen by birthright alone, but by the echo of intention passed down through whispers, letters, and an emerald gem worn by queens no longer living. But just when peace seemed possible, one more twist delivered a final blow to the royal hierarchy. No one expected it. A quiet memo, leaked from within the palace, revealing a decades-old instruction from Queen Elizabeth herself, hidden from public record. What it contained left the monarchy shaken to its very core. It emerged late in the evening, first whispered through the inboxes of a handful of seasoned royal correspondents, then confirmed with the fury of 1,000 suppressed truths. A memo unsigned but traced to a high-ranking aide within Queen Elizabeth's inner circle had surfaced. It was dated in the early 2000s, during the final years of the Queen's most reflective period. Tucked within layers of ceremonial correspondence and family communications, it had remained hidden from scrutiny for decades. The contents were brief but blistering. The Queen, in her own recorded words, had instructed that Queen Mary's final personal wishes are to be honoured in spirit and in deed, and then, with chilling clarity, she added, "The pendant of continuum shall belong to a female born of the quiet flame. She shall wear it not for rank, but for remembrance." The phrase "quiet flame" ignited instant analysis. Royal historians, biographers, and linguists scrambled to interpret it. But among the family, the meaning was instantly understood. It was Beatrice, the royal who had lived away from the crown's harsh spotlight, never seeking controversy, never demanding position. Soft-spoken but unyielding. Loyal but never loud. A woman who had, for years, balanced her duties with dignity, and whose daughter now wore the very pendant that had once belonged to a queen who believed in legacy over lineage. It was no longer speculation. Queen Elizabeth had known, she had seen this coming, and she had left a breadcrumb for those wise enough to find it. The leak changed everything. Camilla, who had remained publicly composed throughout the saga, abruptly cancelled a high-profile charity appearance scheduled for the following day. No explanation was offered, and speculation flooded in like a tidal wave. Insiders hinted at tensions too deep to repair. Others suggested she had been blindsided, that no one in her camp had ever anticipated Queen Elizabeth's quiet alignment with Queen Mary's symbolic intentions. For the first time in weeks, it wasn't Beatrice under pressure, it was Camilla. And the court of public opinion had already begun shifting its weight toward compassion, clarity, and continuity. Behind the scenes, something remarkable happened. King Charles, who had maintained an eerie and careful neutrality throughout the firestorm, reportedly requested a private audience with Beatrice. No cameras, no aides, just a quiet meeting behind closed doors at Balmoral. Those close to the king described it only as a moment long overdue. Though no statement was released, royal observers noted a single powerful gesture later that week. Beatrice stood beside the king at a ceremonial unveiling of Queen Mary's newly restored portrait, an honour never previously extended to her. Branch of the family. The meaning was clear. Quiet acknowledgement had replaced quiet doubt. The monarchy, in its centuries of order and ritual, has survived wars, abdications, and global reckonings. But this was something different. It wasn't a fight for power. It was a reckoning with legacy, a reckoning born of forgotten wills, whispered truths, and one woman's refusal to let history stay buried. And now, the world watches not a queen, not a princess, but a child, wearing a pendant that has outlasted queens, outlived doubt, and outshined tradition. As the monarchy stares down generational change, one small pendant has rewritten the rules, and the future rests in Sienna's tiny, defiant hands. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.